What's up, guys? I'm Chad Barnes, and welcome to the channel. Here, it's all about real car talk, from simple fixes to smart driving tips and keeping your ride in top shape. If that sounds good to you, go ahead and give the video a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button, and make sure you watch all the way through. There's a lot of good stuff coming. Let's get to it.
The Haval brand appeared in 2013 as a division of Great Wall and was initially positioned as a manufacturer of exclusively crossovers and SUVs and aimed at entering the premium segment. The origin of the name Haval. Chinese marketers, inclined to a poetic perception of the world, explained the English phrase "I have all," that is, I have everything, and explained that everything is a strong family, interesting work, loyal friends and a reliable car. And almost the first embodiment of this concept was the Haval H9 shown at the Beijing Motor Show, the production of which started at the plant in Baoding. The truck had a frame construction, independent front axle suspension and a dependent rear axle with Eaton locking. Initially, under the hood there was either a 2-liter gasoline turbo engine GW4C20A with an output of 251 horsepower or 190 horsepower turbo diesel GW4D20T of the same volume. During the first months, they were paired with a 6-speed hydro-mechanical gearbox, but in 2015, the car received an ultra-modern that time 8-speed automatic ZF8 HP. The model was well equipped with comfort options and was presented in 5- and 7-seat versions. China is a rather closed country, and the name of the designer who worked on the appearance of the H9 remains unknown to the general public. Nevertheless, this work can be called quite successful. The car turned out to be very similar to its main competitor, Land Cruiser Prado, but without a single direct borrowing. In the fall of 2014, the car was shown at MMAS, and in 2015, its official sales in Russia began, with the gasoline engine being deformed to 245 horsepower for tax reasons. At first, the realization went neither shakily nor shakily. The rather high, for the Chinese brand, price and underdeveloped dealer network had an impact. So, in 2016 only 72 cars were sold, and in 2017, 180 such cars. In 2017, the car underwent a small restyling, but the real breakthrough began in 2019 when the assembly of the H9 was launched at the company's plant in Tula. Sales quickly went up, and in 2021 they reached 2,697 units. The restyling also had an impact. Under the hood of the 2021 model year cars there was an updated version of the 2-liter turbo engine GW4C20B, the power of which was reduced to 218 horsepower with a simultaneous increase in torque from 350 to 380 nanometers. The power steering was replaced by electric power steering. In the front axle there was a forced lock of the same brand Eaton. The functionality of many electronic driver's assistance increased. Alas, the cost of the H9 is growing along with its popularity, and the situation in the financial and automobile markets only accelerates. The growth of prices, depending on the equipment, new cars of this model cost from 4.9 to 5.3 million rubles. But there is a secondary market. Therefore H9 2015 to 2016 year asked 2-2, 65 million, and for 2017 to 2022, 6-2, 7 million. Also solid, but it is still significantly less than the 4.5 to 5 million that sellers want for fresh cars after the second restyling. But is it worth paying attention to the H9 with mileage? Let's see what their owners write in their reviews. When a person buys a medium-sized frame SUV, he obviously assumes some long trips to the nature with barbecues, tents, awnings and folding furniture. Or fishing. Or a trip to the dacha. In any case, a big car should have a corresponding size luggage compartment. But in the situation with Haval H9, expectations may not be justified. The fact is that in many markets, a car of this class and size can be successful only if it has a third row of seats. The H9 has one. Alas, the folded third row seats increase the floor height and reduce the volume. Owners complain, the third row of seats eats up a lot of space in the trunk. If it is unfolded, you have no trunk. If not, the floor is higher than in TLC 200-inch. I expected a more capacious trunk, but since there is a third row of seats and there is only such a configuration, there is nowhere to go. I have to fold the second row of seats to stow all fishing stuff. The author of one of the reviews notes with surprise that in a significantly smaller crossover Haval H9 the trunk was more than 100 liters larger. And I wouldn't call the "you have no trunk" exaggeration. In the 7-seat configuration, the available volume for stowing luggage is only 112 liters. Nevertheless, the authors of reviews admit that in essence the trunk is not badly organized. There are niches and compartments for tools, jack, first aid kit, wires of cigarette lighter. But in the cabin there are not enough niches and shelves. There is a glove box and a box armrest, but there is nowhere to put the phone. But, according to them, there is a cigarette lighter with a micro-lift and cup holders in half of the torpedo. Only the wash basin is missing. There are a number of other complaints. For example, several reviews note that in order to unfold the third row of seats, it is necessary to remove the curtain covering the trunk. Only there is nowhere to remove it after that. In a word, before buying, it is better to carefully assess whether the trunk will meet your needs. If your plans include some off-road exertions, quite serious, but without real extreme, the H9 will suit you quite well. This is proved by journalistic test drives, including ours, and reviews on the internet. The off-road arsenal includes long travel suspension, Borg-Warner transfer case with reduction gear 1:2, 56, excellent locking rear. Differential Eaton with hydraulic drive, traction engines, both diesel and gasoline, frame. Well, and the last restyling added the possibility to lock the front axle. Locking of the same manufacturer, but with electric drive. Plus to everything there appeared, off-road cruise control off-road, which allows in difficult situations just to press a key, take your feet off the pedals and concentrate on steering. In a word, everything is serious, and some doubts can inspire only not the most heroic ground clearance equal to 206 mm. However, the owners in their reviews unanimously assure that if your plans do not include participation in extreme trophy raids, you can safely dismiss doubts. Passability in mud, sand, snow, I don't even know what to compare it with. It has never failed anywhere. It goes like a tank. I was impressed by the H9's passability. Just an awesome car. I really like the off-road cruise control for an off-road vehicle in the way it is realized. I tried full locking on black soil and I am very impressed with this unit. Off-road qualities are perfect. I drove on snow, mud in the field, dry potholes. I used the downshift and locking only a few times. A very interesting feature, the car jumps out of the mud, but does not bury. In many reviews, the authors describe specific life situations with which the H9 not just coped, but coped with honor. I drove to my Dacia in a snow field 30 centimeters deep on studded rubber in the downshift mode. Another describes how he decided to get to his Dacia through a snow field in a snowstorm. I was driving on fresh loose snow 40 to 50 centimeters deep. It was not clear from the car. I got out to see where I was and then I realized that the snow was above the license plate. I thought I would have to run for a tractor, but the tractor was eventually called by a neighbor who tried to drive his Prado 150 onto the highway and couldn't do it at all. It is worth, of course, to understand that in order to achieve the intended point on the map, you need to soberly assess both your capabilities and the capabilities of the car, because the fairness of the saying, the cooler the Jeep, the farther to run after the tractor, nobody cancelled. It should also be recognized that winter brings Haval H9 owners not only a feeling of confidence in the ability to overcome snowdrifts, but also some troubles and inconveniences. Firstly, many owners note some slowness of the car interior warming up. The interior takes a long time to warm up, 15 to 20 minutes. After 15 to 20 minutes of driving, the interior only begins to warm up. And not only owners of diesel versions complain about it, there would be nothing unexpected in it. Everyone knows that diesels warm up longer, but also those who have a gasoline turbo motor under the hood. For the driver there are no problems. For a couple 3 minutes and the steering wheel warms up completely in a circle, and the seat. And not only the cushion, but also the backrest, but the passengers have to freeze for some time. In fact, the authors of many reviews write that they have not wasted their money on installation of the starter heater. It not only facilitates starting in cold weather, but also sharply reduces the time of warming up the air in the cabin. Alas, there is no standard heater in the car. Secondly, in many reviews authors complain about the work of wiper blades, made sure that the wipers standing on the car are not Suitable for winter operation, they quickly ice up, at the same time become an arc and stop cleaning the windshield, the rubber on the wipers in the frost get stale, and frameless wipers do not adhere well to the glass. But to clean the glass from sticky dirt mixed with de-icing agents, it needs to be watered. And here again there is an ambush. When driving, I turn on washers, but they abundantly water only the lower cut of the windshield. Jet nozzles of the windshield washer are a natural joint for such a car. Fan nozzles are needed. But the owners are most annoyed by the door handle sensor locks that fail in the cold. And if the door locks are opened with a key fob, the fifth door starts to have real problems. A standard saw, when the luggage door handle is covered with a mixture of wet snow and dirt, it cannot be opened from the outside until you wipe it off in wet cold. Whether the trunk handle fails, you need to dry it with a napkin and warm it with your hand. The trunk door in principle works only on the sensor, so it cannot be opened mechanically with a button or key. A couple of times I got so that it did not open at all. The owners cope with this problem. Who can? Someone advises to change the battery in the key. Someone writes that they solve this problem by locking or unlocking the car and the sensor as if reset. After that, someone advises to wipe the handle with a dry cloth. And then everything works. Many claim that the problem was solved by sealing the handle. However, the most radical solution is to run an additional wire from the door so that the trunk can be opened by pressing a button on the key fob. But the H9 copes with winter corrosion to a solid 5. I don't wash off the winter dirt very often, but the chrome is fine. The chrome inserts on the doors from below have faded. There are some spots from reagents, but if you don't look closely, you can't see them. There is no rust anywhere. Chrome on the doors in several places last winter tried to bloom. During the year, 2 or 3 times I treated myself with chrome protection. It took about 5 minutes each time. I haven't seen the problem anymore. One more commonplace, which is practically in all reviews, it is friendly raptures about comfort and quality of salon. The seats are soft, cozy, with well-defined lateral support. It is a song on a long haul. There are practically no complaints about ergonomics, except that some owners complain that the right knee rests on the hard plastic. When moving, my knee rests in the tide of the start-stop button on the torpedo. To combat this inconvenience, I bought a small soft leather pad. And in the rest everything is excellent, so much so that some owners even believe in the naturalness not only of leather, but also of all aluminum and wood. Inside everything is good. Soft nappa leather, aluminum, natural veneer, lacquer, assembly is qualitative. The car inside is super. Everything is worthy, soft, quiet, comfortable, modern, functional, very cool interior. Nappa leather, sandalwood, soft plastic, rubbized handles, twist knobs, velvet inside the glove compartment, backlighting. At the same time, everything is clearly assembled, nothing squeaks or dangles. Quality. At the same time, what is pleasant, the interior is characterized by durability. Here writes the owner of the car after 5 years of operation, the interior is perfect, there are no scratches even in the back, where sometimes a dachshund rides. Slightly rubbed steering wheel, but everything shiny in the cabin shines. All LEDs are burning all the proper colors, all the leather. Without breaks and cracks, not a single squeak anywhere. There is no. I don't take care of the interior, only sometimes wipe the panels with wet wipes. The owners are also pleased with the car's equipment with a variety of modern systems. The list of modern options is decent. Joystick, gearshift, rotary bi-xenon, start-stop system, infinity acoustic system, control of pressure and temperature in each tire separately, steering wheel paddles, parking mode, etc. 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 There's no point in listing everything. There is really no sense to enumerate everything. It is easier to look at the company's website and see what the comfort, elite, and premium configurations differ. In their reviews, the authors note the attention of the creators to details and praise the rear view camera, parktronics, right mirror, lowering down when moving backwards, interior mirror with darkening. However, many recommend to remove the middle headrest of the rear row of seats, interfering with the view. I also like multi-roll with convenient buttons. I used to drive sometimes on Aventus and new E-Class, and in both cases the buttons on a steering wheel depressed me, especially on Ishkar. There is a touchscreen steering wheel, and I was constantly fiddling with it, accidentally switched something there and suffered wildly from it, but on the Havala there is no such thing. Certainly, the set of options is somewhat less in pro-restyling cars. There is not enough 360 camera, adaptive cruise control, there are a lot of morons on the road for a long distance, well, and ventilation of seats, in summer on leather it should be obligatory, one of the authors writes. And still, according to the owners, H9 by the level of comfort and equipment bypasses all its competitors, first of all, Mitsubishi. The Chinese engineers can be proud of the unexpectedly high level of acoustic comfort for a frame SUV. The authors of a considerable part of reviews consider noise insulation almost the main advantage of the model, cool noise insulation. With a diesel engine on winter tires on asphalt at 100 km per hour you can talk without raising your voice. I liked everything, especially the running gear and noise. You ride like on an electric car, amazing noise insulation, really S-class if the engine is not revved up to 6,000, despite visually thin glass in the doors, no noise insulation, no Toyota even stood next to it. And so on, and all in this spirit. The only thing that confuses the authors is what this noise insulation is made of. There is a hatch in the trunk, through which you can look inside and see a thick halter of hollow fiber, or synthepon, with a thickness of centimeters 15 to 20 by I. So, the authors of these reviews are afraid that with temperature differences and high humidity there will be condensation of moisture, and therefore, an active corrosion. Fortunately, so far these fears have not been confirmed. As it was already mentioned, owners like the steering wheel itself, comfortable and grippy. But the steering wheel settings cause quite serious complaints. The thing is that the steering wheel of Haval H9 is very light, but at the same time sharp. On the one hand, it is not bad, you do not need to make amplitude movements when rebuilding. And on the other, the car listens to the slightest movement. It is very good and convenient in the city, but at speed it is wrong. A little distracted and already clinging to the neighboring lane, and it really strains. It is worth a little distracted on the way to texting in the phone or switching the station, as you are already out of the lane, the owners write in their reviews. The situation is aggravated by the fact that the car is very sensitive to longitudinal rutting. If you get into a rut on the Moscow Ring Road at speed, you can easily fly out to another lane. In a word, what is convenient for leisurely driving in the city, maneuvering in a parking lot or overcoming off-road obstacles, can seriously interfere on a high-speed highway. Sensitivity to rutting is, of course, a disadvantage, but in general, the owners of Haval H9 suspension give more than positive assessment. First of all, for smooth running, potholes on the road, they just don't exist anymore. Haval is better than Rexton. The suspension is comfortable and reliable on any killed roads, and without them, both in winter and in summer, I am surprised by the suspension of the car on potholes of dirt and gravel roads, forests and meadows. Super. And here is such an unexpected comparison. Before Haval I drove a sedan Lexus. The driving experience is about the same. Naturally, such a soft and very long travel suspension is not too suitable for a gambling assault of tense turns. But the authors of reviews consider that everything is normal within the limits of this class. The stern tosses. It tosses no more than on the same Prado, and to understand it, it is enough to stop reading any nonsense and to drive this car. It is a frame shed with an uncut rear axle, and not an understated piezo turca with independent suspension. What do you want? In general, the suspension is good, strong. Any mentions about necessity of intervention are met in reviews very rarely, moderately soft. And about suspension travel I can say that during the test in the Caucasus I hardly managed to find a place where I really needed to use axle locks to pass. In their reviews, the authors do not write about any serious problems that require a lot of time and money. But there are enough minor flaws related to the interface and software operation. Most often owners are irritated by the algorithm of control of seat heating. You have to press a button on the panel and then choose the degree of heating on the monitor. It is such an intricate multi-pass. People are terribly stressed by the interface of the multimedia system, especially when heating the seats. The minus is the control of seat heating from the screen. And in general, the owners do not like the multimedia device interface, especially in the case of pre-restyling cars. I will not even talk about the head unit, which has no navigation, and some comfort functions in the car are enabled only through it. The feeling is that it was somewhere lying in a warehouse for 10 years, and then the Chinese bought it cheaply and put it into their wonderful car. In some reviews, the authors recommend replacing the head unit with something else instead of the native stereo. I installed TACC3. It is on Android. You can install any programs. The screen is much bigger than the native one. The only disadvantage is that the mode of switching on the seat heating is not displayed. There are also other minor flaws. Here is one of the owner's writes in his review: when turning off the light constantly gives an error about burned out running lights, but they work correctly. The service cannot do, they say, it is a logical bug in the computer. Or here is such an oddity, also obviously programmed: when the car is started and the key is in the passenger compartment, it is impossible to open the rear trunk door. You have to either turn off the engine or take the key with you. But all this is not fatal at all, and you can get used to such oddities. A person who buys a heavy frame SUV of classic design is unlikely to expect that such a car will be an invariable winner of traffic. Light races and on the highway will behave like a sports car. Nevertheless, in the overwhelming number of reviews, the authors name dynamics among the advantages of Haval H9, or in the worst case, write that they are quite satisfied with it. This applies to both diesel and gasoline versions. I drive the car dynamically, and the 8-step automatic box pleases me. It works adequately and in time. In the sport mode is quite brisk. It is clear that the car is dynamic at the lows, but obviously not for racing. I was worried about the dynamics of overtaking on the highway. Not a bullet, of course, but quite good, especially if you drop a couple of gears down with the steering paddle on the left. The car is sharp. At traffic lights, Prado, TLC 200, Pajero under the mood you can leave behind. In general, the majority of authors of reviews quite positively assesses the consistency of both engines and automatic, although there are certain nuances. Acceleration from a place takes very briskly, as the owners write. Acceleration to 100, according to their feelings, takes 9 to 10 seconds. It seems especially unusual when there is almost complete silence in the cabin. I press the pedal, look, and already 80 km per hour at the permitted 60. At a speed of 100 km per hour, the tachometer shows 1800 revolutions, i.e. the engine does not strain. It is curious that the owners do not note a special difference in dynamics of 245 and 218 horsepower versions. But at higher speeds, everything is not so smooth. I'm driving, let's say, on cruise 100, I decide to overtake, I press the gas. And nothing happens. And nothing happens. After a couple of seconds, the engine reluctantly wakes up and starts gaining speed, then the gearbox goes into low gear, by which time I'd given up on overtaking. Double kickdown at the floor also does not give a sharp reaction, but it's still faster. But if in advance before overtaking to wake up, the engine responsiveness is satisfactory. There are also those who write that the box stopped thinking only after chipping. It would seem that with such dynamics, a large and heavy car should be terribly voracious. But no. In the vast majority of reviews, the authors express satisfaction with fuel efficiency. First of all, naturally, it concerns diesel versions. Average consumption is 8.6 liters, in city mode liters 11-12, 100 km depending on mood, manner of driving and density of traffic jams. Very economical in all respects. Car consumption for the whole period, 8.8 liters. Fuel consumption in summer, Moscow and Gorky Highway, which is all in traffic jams because of eternal repairs. According to the device, 8.9 to 9 liters per 100 kilometers. Consumption did not rise above 10. Total 9.1 inch. Gasoline engines, of course, are more voracious. Powerful 245 horsepower version in the city in summer with air conditioning consumes 14 to 15 liters 100 kilometer, and that if there are few traffic jams, and with traffic jams, all 16. In winter with warming up, the consumption reaches 18 to 20 liters per 100. 218 horsepower version is perceptibly more economical. The consumption is stable in the city, 12.7 liters per 100, and it is pleasant. On the New Year I went on a long trip to a village in the Penza region. The speed was 120 to 140, and in such a mode the car consumed 12 liters per 100 kilometers. The consumption was recorded at a distance of 1,300 kilometer. Naturally, the consumption depends on the manner of driving. There are reviews in which the owners of such cars write about the average level of fuel consumption at the level of 14 to 14.5 liters 100 kilometer, or even 16 in summer and 18 in winter. However, they also do not consider such consumption to be a drawback, especially since the car digests 92 gasoline quite normally. And now for the sad part. All 7 years of the model's presence on the Russian market, the main factor limiting the growth of its sales and popularity was the lack of brand prestige, or rather, the status of a Chinese car itself. The price, or rather, not the price itself or its comparison with the price of competitors of the same class, but the simple unwillingness to pay 2, then 3, and now more than 4 million rubles for a Chinese brand car, added to the negativity. No matter how good the car is in itself, no matter what laudatory reviews journalists and real owners write about it, still a lot of people around will say, the problem with this car is that it will be difficult to sell it later, it will be a big loss. And the guys in the neighborhood will not understand, or colleagues will not consider you a successful man. By the way, the thesis about losses today is not justified. The dynamics of price growth for these cars is as incredible as for the others, and Haval H9 2014 to 2016 year of production is more expensive on the secondary market than new cars in those years. Yes, tectonic events in the automobile market are forcing many people to pay attention to Chinese brands, and in the vicinity of my home in Moscow, a couple of H9s suddenly appeared. But the essence of the situation has not changed. Any positive reviews in the virtual space, and, as I believe, not only there, immediately lead to the beginning of fierce disputes. At first, the China haters Russian. I don't consider this to be a car at all. Those who have money will not take a Chinese. They buy Chinese cars out of desperation. Realists sluggishly fight back. No matter how they try to paraffin the Chinese, sales are only growing, despite the almost quarterly price increase for the entire line. In childhood, you can see, a cheap Chinese toy broke. That's the grudge against the Chinese for life. But opponents do not concede. This bucket does not drive in principle. They are opposed by real owners. This bucket drives perfectly well. At least as good as a diesel Prado and much better than a Prado 2.7. Opponents launch new arguments. Awesome car, but only when it is in the cabin stands with concreted wheels, so that, God forbid, did not go on public roads. No matter how you look at it, but as it was Chinese, so it will remain. The author for such a short period of ownership has not yet learned all the charms of the Chinese car industry. China is China. And in general, in a couple of years the car will rust through and turn into red corpse, and before that it will not drive, because it will fall apart, and therefore it will lose 146% of its value in a year, 2 or 3. This is followed by objections. They say that Chinese cars are scolded by sofa experts who have never sat in these cars, but the owners, which are more and more, are satisfied with the purchase. As for the Haval, the car is really reliable, like a tank. I have a 2019 Pajero Sport. This is junk. I own only 3 months, and the lid of the tank has already bloomed. And here it is interesting to read this testimony concerning the attitude to the car on the road. They give way without problems. They do not blink behind. I feel calm and safe, but only after tinting and removal of nameplates. It's as if I've moved to another car. Apparently, there is still something in the psychology of our people. But, as they say, life itself will punish such people severely, and make them accept the fact that a premium car of Chinese brand is a reality given to us in our feelings. All of the above means that the axiom more expensive does not mean better in the current Russian reality is becoming more and more relevant, so the first thing to look at is the price-quality ratio. And Haval H9 has quite a good one today, and it concerns both new and used cars. If you start to consider different variants, similar by year of release, condition and equipment, you will inevitably come to the conclusion that all competitors will be about 1 million rubles more expensive, and for comparable money, they will be significantly older or in minimal equipment. Plus, according to the owner's testimonies, the H9 is not ruinous in terms of operation. Firstly, it is quite reliable. I have driven 64,000 kilometers, no problems, 5.5 years, normal flight, not a single problem. After the warranty it is easy to service in any decent service station. The car of Chinese production at a mileage of 100,000 kilometers made a feeling of new interior, body, general feeling, and the others at the same mileage were noticeably used. For more than 100,000 mileage any special problems were not noticed, except that a light bulb will burn out or the battery will go down. The car is unreal high. Not a single problem for 70,000 inch. As a matter of fact, there are many times more statements of this kind and stories like my father-in-law had a Haval H9 which traveled about 50,000 kilometers. The gearbox flew, changed under warranty, the fuel hose is constantly torn, he takes a spare with him, the hole is flooded with diesel are found in isolated quantities and very rarely. High corrosion resistance is especially worth mentioning because body repairs require the most serious financial investments. And here, too, there are praiseworthy reviews on the verge of garage stories about tin-plated vulgar bodies. The paintwork is excellent. 130 to 140 microns and double-sided galvanization all around. Few competitors have such, and when H9 becomes a rusty bucket, it seems that there won't even be holes left from the others. I didn't find any rut. In spring I was upset by one red spot, but it was washed away at the washing, having turned out to be bitumen in pollen. Double galvanization of a body, not a single point of corrosion even on chips. On the lower edge of the door end, the paint is beaten to metal, corrosion does not think to appear. In many reviews, the authors write about the acceptable price for maintenance, and if a few years ago they complained about the poor development of the dealer network, now the situation is radically improving. On the profile forum of owners, participants write that TO1, TO2, and other small TOs cost about 10 to 10.5 thousand with consumables. And big, for example, TO4 and TO8, about 25 to 30,000. But financial arguments concerning the cost of hull insurance and MTPL insurance sound much more weighty. So, hull insurance for the H9 will cost the owner 67,000 rubles a year, and for a similar Toyota Prado, almost 150. At the same time, as one of the owners writes, no satellites are required, the car is not hijacked. That is, the associated mandatory costs are minimal, you can do budgetary MTPL in the neighborhood of 7,000 and tax 9,000. In this case we are talking about the diesel version, because the tax on the 245 horsepower version in Moscow will amount to 18,375 rubles and on the 218 horsepower version, 16,350. As for liquidity and residual value, among the authors of reviews there are those who sold their H9 to buy a newer car of the same brand. So, according to their testimonies, the sale took not so much time and the losses were not the biggest. In short, you can pay little attention to the words of detractors that in a few years you will be happy if you manage to sell it for 5,000 inch. In conclusion, the Haval H9 presents a compelling option for those seeking a robust and feature-rich SUV with its impressive off-road capabilities, spacious interior, and advanced technology. However, potential buyers should also consider the drawbacks, such as its fuel efficiency, brand perception, and resale value. Ultimately, whether to buy or not to buy the Haval H9 depends on your specific needs and priorities. Weigh these 5 reasons carefully to make an informed decision that best suits your lifestyle. Thank you for watching, and we hope this guide has helped you in your car buying journey.